Hey everyone, I'm Arden Stone. Um, I've been playing Diablo for quite a long time. I played all of Diablo 3, and I did play Diablo 2 Resurrected. I did not play Diablo 2 originally, but I have a friend who played it uh, a lot, and so we've done a lot of discussing about things about that game and kind of comparisons over time from that game to Diablo 3 to Diablo 4. And I'm not like I'm not a big streamer or anything, but I do stream every once in a while. But I I went to my background is like um, a game development and the game design, I guess. And I don't work for any specific companies right now or anything like that, but I just wanted to put together my thoughts on the the overall sort of like design flaws that I see with Diablo 4. Um, there's all kinds of opinions on the game since it's come out, and there's quality of life features that people have been talking about that obviously need to be in the game. There's a lot of things that that make the game kind of annoying and tedious and certain things like that. Um, and for the most part, I think it seems to me that like the reality of this game is that it looks like it was pushed out the door. Um, you know, most of the time in development cycles, the there comes a time when the product needs to be sold, and you can't really push it any longer, right? So, I mean, to me, it seems like there's a lot of features in the game that we're just missing, a lot of quality life that it doesn't seem like it was an oversight on their part. Like, there's no, there's like I cannot really believe in my mind that they would not think that a search feature would be good for the game. Like there's no way that the developers said, "Oh, didn't think of it," or just said, "No, let's not put in a search feature." It more than likely was in the backlog and they couldn't get to it, and upper management said the game needs to ship, and so they launched it. They got it to, launchable, quote, launchable state. And that's what they do. I mean, the backlog, I'm sure, is full of things that they wanted to do, um, but just didn't have time to get to. Um, does that mean that the you know the game is doesn't need those things? Like obviously not. It does, but um, you know, there's nothing that can be done about that at the moment except for to just give them the time to make the changes. However, I would have preferred it if they would have delayed the game. Personally, myself, I would have been happier if they would have delayed the game and just put in all the quality of life features, put in all the things they knew needed to be done. But again, it's neither here nor there because that's not something that it's not something that I get to decide. It's not nothing that has to do with me. The company does what they want to do. But um, I've played. I've got a druid to 100. I've put in a lot of hours in Nightmare Dungeons. I've gotten up to tier 74. I've done a tier. I've tried to do a tier 80 actually, and was doing okay through it, but didn't complete it. Just ran out of lives. Um, was going to continue to do 75, 76 and go for that, but I've kind of just since the season was real announcement came out, I've just kind of lost interest in continuing on the Eternal Realm here, just because it's so close to the season. I'm probably just gonna wait and try again with the season and see what comes about. But I did have this list that I put together of things that I feel are the real like problems, the real quality of life issues, and then the real like I don't know setbacks or drawbacks that are missing from the game. The things that or the drawbacks of the game, I guess. The things that we're missing, the things that they probably have in their backlog. I was going to go through this list, and this isn't in any particular order. I just put them in here as I thought of them, and many of them are more importance than others. But the list numbers don't really mean anything in terms of priority or importance. Let's see. Let me just adjust this here. So I'll just start at the top here with gameplay. Um, you know, whenever you're playing a Diablo game in general, anybody who's played one, anybody who's a veteran, and anybody who's new, it's like movement speed is one of the most fun uh, aspects of Diablo games, right? It's it's fun to be able to go fast and walk or run quickly through dungeons and kill monsters. And while there are ways that, in Diablo 3, there are ways that you could improve your movement speed drastically, and it created like these speed builds. I don't think that's what needs to happen in this game, but there is something that I think would be really cool, to kind of improve the game for everybody, and that is that I think it would be great if movement speed was just something that we acquired through the leveling process, up to an extent. I mean, we started 100% movement speed, level one, and when we hit level 100, we would have, more movement speed based on going through that leveling process. In my number one, I say movement speed is clearly something that every character should have and every player enjoys. So why not build that into the core leveling experience from 1 to 100? And that would be something like maybe 125% movement speed would be like the max at level 100. So you'd be getting the 0.25% movement speed for each level that you went up. Something like that, right? Something that doesn't break the game, but when you reach 100, it makes you feel like you're actually moving faster and you're able to get places without having to jump on the horse all the time, and it doesn't feel like a drag because nobody likes to move around um, and walk super slow. I was running a pulverizer bear for a little while, and without movement speed on the boots or whatever, when I just couldn't get it or something. I had a really nice item, but it just didn't have the movement speed, and I couldn't roll it, so I was using it for a little while. It felt so terrible to walk around, at the 100% movement speed. It's just not satisfying. And the whole idea of a game, it should be that things are satisfying, especially some of the more core features. So I don't know. That's the first thing, and then of course it goes on to say that players could then choose whether they want to, add more movement speed with their gear, but at least everyone would have at least have 125% movement speed, which would be really nice. It would allow you to say, okay, well I don't really need to put the movement speed on my boots. I don't need that. I can just 125 is fine. And then you can get something else to replace it. I would just, it's to me, it's just like movement speed isn't a feature that I want to have to get on my gear just so I can have it. It's it's like a core foundation of the game. Everybody wants to move faster. They don't want to walk super slow. So anyway, um, but again, not game breaking. So number two, and this is the gameplay section. Again, these are not in priority of any importance. Um, so as a druid, there are abilities like tornadoes. You throw out tornadoes, and they travel around and they do damage. And there are legendary aspects, that can affect abilities. Well, the tornado legendary effect is the ability for tornadoes to seek up to three targets, and on a ring or something like that. It works pretty good. There's a lot of times when it's just like the tornadoes just kind of do their own thing and they don't care what you want it to do, and they just even on single targets sometimes they just don't do a very consistent damage. I mean, sometimes you can throw them all out and then they'll be right there and they'll spin right on top of the enemy that you want them to spin on, and they'll circle around them and do a lot of damage. And other times it'll just kind of do this weird thing where it's like it's not ticking, it's not actually um, you know they're not staying on the spot. And I think that any kind of ability that is going to be hard to predict in general, it's not something that the player can just place and do damage at that location. Like a rogue or or like a sorceress being able to just shoot something. Any ability that you don't have a lot of control over should have some more attention uh, placed on it right now. That they need to kind of, in my opinion, they need to look at those and say, well, how can we improve this a little bit? Because the tracking and stuff like that, it's not very good. Um, you know, when you don't have that aspect, cool, whatever. They go all over the place. That's fine because you don't have the aspect. But when you have the aspect, I just think it needs a little bit more attention and a little bit of more thought put into how the tracking is going to be and work. Um, Number three on the gameplay section here, in my opinion, it's not even season one yet, and so far I've seen builds that are crazy out of control. I don't know what their intentions are for um, for nerfing or balancing any of this, but um, damage numbers, in my opinion, are like way out of control already. I mean, we didn't want trillions and billions and all that stuff in Diablo 3, and that was the only way they could do it by adding more health. But this game was supposed to be different by having armor and other features on the enemies. It was supposed to allow us to not have to have millions of damage, but there are already builds that are doing millions upon even up to 100 millions. Um, so I don't know. I think so. I have more to talk about that would kind of coincide with this um, in further sections of this list here. But suffice it to say that I will get to those in a little bit, and that damage numbers to me just seem like they're a little out of control. I would love to see them rein them in a little bit and make it a little, make it just make it a little bit. Let's just kind of move gradually here, not get out of control right out the gate. Um, so number four, it's clear that the horse obviously needs attention, needs work. There have been a lot of people complaining about the horse. I've seen that. I have friends that complain about the horse. I, the horse doesn't bother me a lot, but there are times when the navigation on the horse is, I don't know, like uh, definitely wonky, and you get caught on things and all that stuff. So I can totally see there's some problems there. Number five, there to me this is a huge one, and I've got more to talk about this one. This is just the start of it, but there's not really enough build diversity in the game. They chose to, and this has to do with itemization mostly. And I've got the whole itemization section right here that we're gonna move into. Um, I watched a video of before the game came out after the beta. I think everybody all the streamers were doing their takes on what they saw in the beta, and Quinn69's video kind of spoke to it the most, I think, or the best, where he said that there's too much um, specific. There's too many specific things being done with legendaries, and not enough more generic type stuff. Not enough just items that are working for everybody and for every type of item, or sorry, every type of ability. And it's kind of shoehorning. He didn't say all these words, but it's kind of shoehorning everyone into certain builds, and it's based on like there's the game the developers implemented items that have specific things that make a certain ability better. And so if there isn't one like that for the ability that you want to use, well then you're just not going to use that ability. Um, and it kind of goes into, or he kind of went into it saying that like, five or six builds could turn into 5,000 builds, right? And it's a very good point. And it's something that I've actually thought ever since I first saw the very first people playing Diablo. Um, I it's just hold on one second. it's actually it's really yeah, it's really not great. Because I would rather have the ability to use any skill that I have and be viable with it, and be able to put on legendaries that can improve the build, but not make it like some kind of out of control, you know, uh, godly character. I just want there to be more variety in everything. Right? There's a lot of skills. It would be fun to be able to actually use any of those skills and not feel like I have to play what was given to me by the developers. You know, give the players the agency to make anything viable. You know, and by in order to do that, you have to mess with itemization. And I'll kind of start getting into this list here, the itemization part of it. So let me open this back up. Um, so number one in the itemization is skills and paragon points should be, in my opinion, the source of the largest power increases. And so like what do I mean by that? Um, obviously we have skills, we have points that we can put into the skills, and to me those the way that you interact with that should be the way that you actually make your character really powerful. And the gear should provide a complement to that that doesn't give you 10 times the amount of power that you had without it, or 20 times the amount of power that you had without it. Like, the gear should balance it. The skills should be very powerful, and the gear should be, like I said, a balance of that. That you want both, but you don't need one more than the other. Um, and again, it kind of goes back to me saying basically make all abilities viable rather than uh, dictating to use what abilities are, or to us. I think I meant to put to us, dictating what abilities are usable simply because they have a legendary aspect that makes them, OP or something. And then, because that would kind of throw off the whole game balance because the game is balanced around having these OP items like something like Pulverize does, 150% more damage with some kind of thing, or whatever it is. Um, balance the game around the other way that it would be made. Balance the whole game around having, you know, the skill points and the paragon points being where your main source of power is. Of course, you would still want gear, right? The gear is important. It's just that I don't think that by having, you know, I would rather see ranges of where you have perfect builds to non-perfect builds have a range damage ranges that are different. The difference in damage range would be like a lot less than what it is right now, right? Something where you might be doing 50 to 100,000 damage with a not great build, but you might be able to do 300 to 400 to 500,000 with a very good build. Not what it is right now at the bottom end, and then 139 million damage hits with this really badass certain build or whatever. Now, there are some that are like that, and not all of them can do 139 million, but I've seen it. So um, that just to me that's too much of a damage range. That's too much of a difference. Um, and a lot of that has to do with skills I mean, sorry, the stats that come on the gear and all that stuff. And so, I mean, obviously that's kind of part of it. And it's hard for them. I'm sure it's going to be, it'd be hard to change the game this way, this drastically and rebalance. It's not something they could just do super easily. But I just felt like I know that some of the streamers like Quinn had talked about this during things before the betas even. Uh, you know, I kind of was under the impression that the developers understood that, you know, um, Diablo 3's um, set items were not really well received after a while. It was like, yes, it was great at the time because we didn't know any better. Then we started to realize that, hey, this is just getting really stupid because the only thing that makes us more powerful is just more percent damage, more percent damage, more percent damage on top of that. We're just doing 10,000%, 20,000. It just gets kind of stupid. And again, you get stuck playing what they want you to play, right? That's not fun. If I'm just going to play what the developers want me to play and what everybody else is going to play, then why do I play? I mean, I'd rather have the choice and being able to create and play whatever I want rather than being told. Um, so moving on to number two, I'm actually everything that I've said is kind of explaining one, two, and I'm going to get into three here, but two was basically stats and gear should kind of complement the skills in a way that just isn't just providing, X% damage bonus. Um, I think it would just be better. Um, and then, of course, number three here, legendaries are, in my opinion, too specific. Certain, like, there are a lot of generalized legendaries that everybody gets to use, and I think that's the way it should be. Like, definitely better. The ones that are for a certain class are, in my opinion, kind of ruining the game. I think they need to make all the legendaries be available for every class, and they need to all work with every class. Instead of saying pulverize does 150% more damage or creates some forward thing, move that to a unique if that's what you want to do. A unique might be able to do that. That would make more sense. But all the legendaries, in my opinion, should be kind of generally for everyone because it allows everybody to have more options. Number one, and I think that's just better for the game. Gives you the ability to make more variety. Um, and part of that is the uniques as I talked about there for a second. Basically, uniques in my mind should be the real special things, right? They should provide more meaningful changes to how spells or abilities function. Um, right here, right? Um, they are the ones that should make major changes to an ability or a skill. I would prefer it if they could even be more generalized to work with all classes. So instead of saying something like, um, you know, pulverize has a forward, creates a shockwave forward, it would be cooler. It would be more, to me, it would be more impressive if they could make it so that all melee abilities create a shockwave. Now you're like able to really play around. You don't have to say, okay, this is a pulverized build. This is a pulverized piece. You can say this could be for shred or this could be for anything because I can do melee with anything, right? And that to me, just there you go. You have more variety. You can play around with more stuff. Um, so lots of things like that. I mean, like there are other items that you don't have to say werewolf form is your new true form and you gain 2 ranks to all werewolf. I mean, you could do stuff like this, but you're being very specific. And so this only can be an item for the druid that is going to be for the werewolf, obviously. But it would be cool to say like, well, maybe there is something like this that you have that's like that you want the werewolf to be your true form. But it'd be cool if there was a way to make it so that instead of having it be just werewolf, you could um, you could create a way to classify what werewolf is in terms of it is classified. It's a shape-shifting skill. Um, and so druid's the only one that can shapeshift, so that would still be locked to the druid. But you could say shape-shifting skills. Your there putting things like this maybe into the talent tree, the skill system, and then not doing it here, right? Putting could give 2 additional ranks to shape-shifting skills or something like that. But werewolf form is your new true form. That could have just been a skill on the skill tree. Um, that could have just been a skill on the skill tree that as a player you have to take if you want to be able to do that. You're sacrificing a point, but you're getting the ability to do that. Things like that. And then again, kind of generalize um, the uniques in a fashion that will allow everybody to be able to use them. That way, it's again providing more flexibility, more variety for everyone and all the builds, that type of thing. And a lot of things like uniques that I've seen in this game would be, you know, could easily be converted into some kind of skill point that I think would work. It would function better as a skill point rather than being, a unique that's specific to this character, to the druid or whatever. So let me get back to my list here. Um, there are some other things like itemization that are just kind of basic. I personally feel like respec costs are a bit over the top. I have respec 5 times with this druid. I've done 5 different builds. I've done pulverized, and then I respec to tornado druid. And I respec into the nightmare dungeon paragon board. Then I changed part of it myself into a build that was more single target. Um, and come to find out later on, actually, after I switched it, I actually found somebody else who had a Lilith build, which was almost exactly what I had built um, with my single target build. Um, I had never even seen it before that, but I had made similar changes to make it more single target. So I was running that for a little while. Then I found that thing actually later. Um, but I also switched out to the Bulwark build. I've tried that. And then I came back to the Nightmare, or to the uh, uh, Tornadoes with the single target build again. And I've been wanting to go back to the Nightmare Dungeon version, but I'm not going to spend any more money. I had 145 million gold when I started all that, and now I've got 68 million. And I just don't really want to spend any more. I don't really want to. It's too much. To me, it's too much work to keep going back and forth. I would prefer to be able to have the cost slightly less, um, or just something. And to go along with that, I'm just going to skip down here because in the user interface, it would be nice to have, it would be convenient to have a refund all button on the Paragon menu as well. Because some people just want to do that. I don't want to have to right click every node to go all the way back. It was quite slow doing all that, and it was not very satisfying. Um, Back up here, number 5 of itemization. Enchantment costs are also, to me, a little bit over the top. I don't see why they need to be so expensive. Um, they're they're just they're a little bit over. Um, I've been doing a lot of enchantment. I think most people have. I'm sure everybody that I've seen so far has said that they're kind of expensive. They're a little bit over, a little bit too much. They would like to see them be dropped. I agree. And on top of that, actually, there's another one in here that I'll just put it down at the bottom. But basically, number 11 would be that it would be nice. This isn't an itemization. It's not an itemization thing. It is it's more of a UI thing. UI thing here. So enchantment um, vendor or window should provide list of available stats. Whoops. Available stats. Um, it's something that was in Diablo 3. Again, I don't think the developers went, "Hey, let's just leave this out on purpose." You know, Clearly they thought of it. They had to have, right? It's in Diablo 3. I think again, this is one of those things that comes down to what could they finish and what was important for the game to launch, and what could be fixed later. And a lot of these things on this list are things that can be fixed later. And so they probably cut it, put it in the backlog, and they're planning on adding it later, right? Um, that's the truth there. Number 6 of itemization. Um, so on this one, I generally feel like the aspect tab in the bag is I feel like the bag is poorly designed in general. Okay, there's a few reasons for that, but like the aspect tab and then the aspects in the stash, like there's just too many things that I want to keep on a regular basis. Um, and it literally clogs up the already extremely small stash space that we have, and it doesn't really make sense to have aspects as items that we have to store in our stash. In general, I mean, I think it's a cool idea, you know, but personally, if I was designing this system for a game, I would have said, like, no, this is not the way to do it. Like, we want to build something where they go, and that is why they have the codex, right? There is a codex. Of course, there are certain ones that are not in the codex, but that's that's the weirdest thing to me in general. Is there's no reason to have legendary aspects that are not in the codex. It's kind of it's just arbitrarily um, like a system that they designed for no reason, right? It's an arbitrary part of this whole codex thing. It's like let's have legendaries, or sorry, of the whole legendary system. But they could have just put them all in, and that's kind of goes back to if they were all generic and they work for everybody, it would make sense that they would just sit in the codex, right? And you wouldn't have to have ones that are specific. Now there's a lot of ones that are specific even in the codex, like necromancer only, sorcerer only, you know, these things. Um, but we have this place. It would make more sense to just utilize it for every single aspect. Then, when the aspect is broken down, or the item is broken down, and you collect the aspect from it, it could upgrade said codex value with whatever the highest value you've obtained from the gear, and you wouldn't have to continually find these aspects over and over again and then say, well, I might need that later. I'm going to stuff it in my stash because my stash is already two tabs are dedicated to just aspects because I don't want to lose things that I might need later because I continue to change my build back and forth and want to try something new, and I'm gonna need it for another piece of gear, or I'm gonna oh, this time I need to move my I might have to move my Earth and Might key passive ability over to a different piece of gear and use it from there, because I might need something. So it's like I have to have additional versions of these in my stash. But if it was just, hey, everything's in the codex, you could just grab it from there and it can be used. And it would just be whatever was the highest value that you acquired. If you never got the highest value, like whatever these are, if you never got 25% crit strikes, then you would have the 19% that I had. Like, for example, right here, I would only have the 19% if that's the highest I ever got. I could put it onto another item, but I will never have the 25% from the codex until I find that item and uh, you know salvage it or whatever, break it down into the codex. Um, so going back here, number 7 of the itemization. Um, you know, I think there's more than just myself that I would agree that there is a lot of like abundance, and there's an abundance of useless stats. Uh, there are a lot of things that in this game we've got just these, you know, damage to all the different types of uh, crowd control, different types of crowd control, stuns and all those things. And in here I have two different points. Um, the first one is, these a lot of these stats are actually useless because of the fact that vulnerable damage and crit damage and core damage are the most powerful things, and they're going to be pretty much mandatory for every build. So you're not going to ever take something that is not vulnerable damage on a weapon or vulnerable crit damage and core damage. If you're not using core damage, then that wouldn't make, you wouldn't take that. But vulnerable damage and crit damage, you're always going to have. And on rings, there's no reason why you would take those other stats. So it's like that's a problem, obviously. There is a problem there. Regardless of what some people want to say, there is a problem there. There's a fundamental problem with how they built this system. If they want vulnerable damage to be that powerful and they want crit damage to be that powerful, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with having a lot of other stats that are worthless because that doesn't feel good. And it is it's overpopulating, or there's a word for it, but it's basically overpopulating the stat. It's gosh, well, I'm trying to think of the word. It is well, yeah, it's basically, I'm just going to say, it's basically overpopulating the list of stats that are available when you want to, when you need to get an item or whatever, right? And so I can't think of the word that I was trying to go for, and I know somebody's probably going to put it in the comment, but um, bloat. Thank God I thought of it. Bloat. The word is bloat. It's artificially bloating up the list of all the stats, when we all know that there isn't any reason to have those because you're going to use the vulnerable damage and crit damage, for the majority of it, and other things that are actually more important like armor and other stuff like that. You're not going to take, these stupid uh, damage to slowed and damage to whatever. So that kind of goes into the next one here, number 8. We have damage to slow. We have damage to stunned, frozen, chilled, knocked back, knocked down. We have crowd controlled damage, even, right? But the last time I checked, all of those are actually crowd control. So I don't know why we need to see all the different types. It's just, again, it's kind of like bloat for no reason, but to just be bloated. Um, and I don't know. Why can't we just condense it all into just crowd controlled? I don't see why there needs to be a specific name for each one. We know they're all crowd control. Um, Again, with crit damage, we kind of have a similar problem with crit damage. I mean, crit damage is crit damage, right? Whether you get it from werewolf, werebear, earth, storm, lightning, fire, shadow, physical, cold, poison, or whatever else is in the damn game, I don't really give a fuck. All I care about is that it's crit damage. So does it really need to be named? I don't really care. I don't really know why it needs to be named. Can we just, you know, make it just crit damage? Because it just again it's just arbitrarily convoluting the stat list with bloat. Um, so I don't know. That's my take on those. Number 10. In my opinion, I think it would be great, for ancestral items to have a fifth stat. If they were able to roll with a fifth stat, because then as you're going from level 70 to 100, you have this extra carrot to chase. I mean, you're obviously going to be getting, ancestral items and sacred items, but it'll be nice to know, like, hey, I can keep my eye out for an ancestral item with a fifth stat, because that would be amazing. And then legendary items could either, depending on how they would want to implement this system, the legendary items that you get that are ancestral in that, they could just have the fifth stat, or maybe it's that you actually have to find the rare item with the fifth stat in order to, um, turn it into a legendary with the fifth stat. Make that part of the system. I don't know exactly what would be better, um, but like without all the convoluted stats, this actually might be nice because you wouldn't have to feel like, oh God, I'm fighting RNG just to get the fifth stat, and then I'm fighting RNG just to get, good stats that I need. Um, Considering there's so many, in the list, in the pool. That would be pretty cool. In my opinion, that'd be cool. I would really love to see a fifth stat that I could chase. I like to chase things. When there's nothing to chase, the game becomes boring. Um, or when the things that I am chasing are not really interesting, then it's also boring. So let me move down here to dungeons. I think most people can agree with some of these topics. A lot of them are just things that I think I've already heard over, looking at forums and finding, watching streamers, watching videos. There are things about either nightmare dungeons or just in general dungeons. Um, First one is cold enchanted affix kind of sucks. It's not fun to be, you know, permastunned by multiple elites who have the ability to freeze you. If if you're a druid and you have you're running an unstoppable build like bulwark or something, hey, you're cool. You can just fly right through it, no problem. But there's it doesn't give. This is limiting. Okay, this is limiting in a way that does not allow players the agency to choose a build that they want to run if the cold enchanted affix is going to be something that's going to be dropping all the time. Like they just can't do that if they're going to play. If it's let's just say I wanted to play whatever I wanted to play, I would have to immediately understand that I can't not do the cold enchanted affix if I don't have the ability to be unstoppable most of the time, or have at least a couple of ways to become unstoppable. Um, and so because of that, I'm just being limited. Like like I said, I have to go in understanding that I just won't be able to do that enchant, and I'm just going to delete it most of the time. So like I said, this is not to say that there aren't builds that are perfectly fine doing cold enchanted. I think there are other, you know, it's good to have things that are hard for certain classes or certain builds, but having something like cold enchanted and making it so that it's locking the majority of players out of even doing it. It's kind of like why maybe we should just like why is it there if we're not gonna and I go into that with with another one here, like resource burn is kind of another one. Most of the builds use course or use resource to do damage. There's going to be some that don't, but like a lot of the builds use resource. So if you're going to try to do resource burn with enemies that are ranged, it's like forget about it. If you get a dungeon with resource burn that has ranged enemies, you might as well just salvage it because it's you're not going to do it. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be satisfying. It's going to be very annoying. And so the reality is that if you get the resource burn, you have to have a map that has melee enemies only, or only a few ranged enemies, or you have to be able to just delete all the enemies. So if you're pushing, resource burn is not something you want, obviously. Um, so why have something in the game if only 10% of the builds or less are ever going to be able to work with it? It just kind of seems um, just not very smart. We could just replace it with something that isn't going to be that detrimental to all the builds or the majority of the builds. So that was number 4, resource burn. So cold enchanted definitely kind of sucks. And resource burn definitely kind of sucks. Um, Now, number 2, on death explosions. I've heard lots and different things about on death explosions. Um, you know, Personally, I don't like them that much, but they're not the worst in my opinion. I, you know, I'm used to it from Diablo 3. It's whatever. They want to put them in, they want to put them in. I think the fire one to me is the worst. It's the most annoying because not only does it blow up under your feet, but also shoots out fire, which is kind of cheap because you may think you're okay when you step away from it, and then you die because the fire shot you right at the time you moved, and maybe you just don't have the ability to sustain the kind of damage that it puts out. Um, so I don't know. I never had a problem with on death explosions in Diablo 3. The whole molten desecration, whatever, molten circle that would explode. It was easy to move out of it. It wasn't humongous. It was easy to move out of it. It was easy to see. So it was like, yes, this, and you could tell that they were going to have it because, they had fire under their feet, which of course this one does kind of do the same thing. They're going to have it, so it's like, yes, you have to move out of the way. I don't have a problem with them that much. I just think that they are kind of not great. Some people would say that they're terrible, and I that's fine. I mean, I don't think they're great. I don't think they're great. So that's why they're on the list here. Um, so number three, lightning storm to me is not satisfying, and I did not type satisfying. I typed satisfying. Satis satisfying as a dungeon mechanic because it's this incremental stop and go thing. Most people I would think would agree that you don't want to stop that much when you're in a dungeon. You want to be able to just keep going. Like it's more fun to just keep going and blasting enemies. It comes back to also like the whole issue that people are having with backtracking. Like I don't want to stop and walk back because this lightning barrier thing has decided to uh, go back 10 feet behind where it was to put up the bubble. Like, why do I need to do that? Just stop telling me to go to where you're at. Like, that's absolutely, it's just, it's such an annoyance. Um, and then I've seen it where, like, it pops a bubble, like, right at the top of a ladder when you're trying to go down, and you have to go back up the ladder to get in the bubble. It's like, okay, so what you're telling me is that I have to stop and wait for this stupid thing before I go down a ladder. I have to stop, sit there, and then make sure that it finishes doing its next occurrence before I go down the ladder, just to be sure that I don't have to worry about it. And it becomes really annoying. Um, and then of course there's the issue with it being in hardcore, where it can be off the path area and certain things like that. It's a problem. It can be a problem for that, but like I mean, overall, I just find it to be an annoyance. Um, I don't know what the solution to that mechanic is. I just find it to be annoying. I don't think, I don't know. I mean, I almost feel like there's just a different way they could implement it. Something that doesn't require you to have to stop and go stand in a bubble. I don't know. The Tempest affix. I think this is the one with the wind walls. Tempest. I want to say. I could be wrong with the name there, but I don't know. Yeah. So that wind wall is obviously really um, annoying and hard to visually read things around it. So like that's why I put here wind walls are visually obstructive. um, when you get the wind wall and it has the three walls and your character's on the inside of it, on the other side of the wall from your view, and you've got like death pulse or something like that on the ground or whatever, you can't even see your character, so you wouldn't be able to see any of the death pulse. You wouldn't be able to see any of that stuff. Because it's so visually obstructive, that is why I don't like it. If they could kind of fix that, make it more translucent, or just do something indifferent where it's not completely obstructing your view, that'd be great. Okay, number five on the dungeons, we already talked about, which is a resource burn, so we're gonna skip that one. Number six is backstabbers. Same question. Why have an affix that only 10% of the builds will even play? If you have backstabbers, I mean, I'm not even sure that's the right question. The right question for that one is why. The actual question for that is why? Because backstabbers is fucking horrible. They do so much damage to you. Like, if you're a melee, you might as well just throw that away because forget it. You're gonna have enemies behind you and they'll kill you. Unless again, if you're pushing, if you're just doing some low-level nightmare dungeon, it's not a problem. But if you're pushing, it's like, just forget about it. Backstabbers is horrible. Um, Maybe reduce the amount of damage they do. I mean, like they don't need. It's just crazy. Um, Number seven, objectives in dungeons can be mentally draining. You know, there are some in Diablo 3 rifts were absolutely fun, no matter what, because you're just burning through the dungeon and you're just going from start to finish, and you're not stopping for things. You're just blowing shit up, and then you're looting. You're doing small events that might happen on your path, like cursed chests, and you're finding shrines, and you're doing those things, but they're on the path. They are not like in some weird dead end corner, and you're not having to go there and then come back with something. And they're not asking you to kill everything in the whole dungeon, and then one of the enemies decides to stay inside of the cage that you haven't broken the door off of, so it can't get to you because it won't teleport. And then you have to travel, you know, way into this other section to be able to open that door and kill that last guy. So, in other words, what I kind of put is objectives that can be completed while on the path to the end of the dungeon makes sense. Objectives that take you into a dead end just to walk back to where you came from do not make sense. I think that, objectives in general, again, are just mentally draining. They could definitely be implemented better. Um, I'm not going to say that objectives should be completely removed, but I just think they should be implemented in a fashion that makes them more fun. Um, Most dungeons, number 8, most dungeons with ranged enemies are not good for Nightmare since they can all attack you at the same time, whereas melee enemies have to reach you before they can attack. Um, Personally, as a druid, I mean, I would say with most classes, anybody that has a choice with a dungeon, whether they're gonna like if you have a choice, if you have two dungeons that have the same affixes, one of them has that has all melee enemies, the other one has all ranged enemies. More than likely, you're really gonna just want to do the one with the melee enemies because it's easier. Um, it's just easier, and I don't know what else to say about that. I personally delete almost all the sigils that I get that have ranged enemies. If I know that dungeon is full of ranged enemies, I just kind of delete it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to deal with it. It's too much work for me when I know I can just go do one that has like spiders and stuff that are super easy to kill, and I'm not gonna, you know, they're not gonna be brutally um, murdering me with arrows from across the screen, all over the place, three or like 10 or 5 or 10 of them all at the same time. Um, Now we're moving into the user interface. Now there are certain things that I probably am going to miss on this list. Per, More than likely, I'm sure there's people that are like, okay, well, there's things on here that are not that I, that so and so knows about or whatever. But like, there are other issues. I agree. I'm just not going to list them here because some of them to me aren't as important. They're not things that to me are really fundamentally problems with the game. They're things that are maybe things that need to be fixed, but like aren't super super important. Um, so there, again, if you see something, if you're seeing not seeing something on this list, don't think that it doesn't belong on the list. It's just that I didn't find it necessary to put on here or something maybe. Um, so in the user interface, we have a lot of things that have already been talked about. Things like the stash space. It's obvious we need that. And in my opinion, it would be cool if they could provide the stash space that actually has some kind of, excuse me, side tabs or side tabs for consumables, quests, items, maybe not quest items, but equipment and then consumables, and then if you're going to continue to do aspects like this, then yeah, maybe a stash side tab that has, so each tab would, at the top, you'd have the side tabs that would say equipment, consumable, and aspects on them or something like that, right? Or just pictures. Doesn't necessarily have to say those words, but it would make sense, given the amount of crap that we have to put in the inventory already, the way it is. But we definitely need more stash space. That's a given. Um, Number two, sigils take up a lot of the space, um, and begin to become cumbersome. So what I mean by that is, if you go into your consumables and you have potions like I do over here, where I just hold, a lot of potions here. This isn't even all my potions. I've got about another 10 or 12 sitting in my stash that I just can't fit in here because I want to have some space for more nightmare sigils. Um, for a while, I actually only had like 9 spaces because I had all my potions in here. but or my elixirs or whatever. But like I've noticed generally that nightmare sigils are really annoying in general to have. It's like this was kind of solved in Diablo 3 with the obelisk, right? We create a dungeon. Now it didn't have a fixes and all that we chose from, but we create a dungeon and we go into it. And it doesn't make us have to store something in our inventory. Now in Greater Rifts, it's like there was a key. The key went into your stat into your materials, but they made it just stack in there. It doesn't become an object that you have to hold on to. And what I've found in Diablo 4 is that I get way too many keys. If I wanted to do all the keys, forget about it because like I can't pick up the keys. I get more keys than I can do. I get more keys faster than I can do the keys that I have. So I have to drop keys. I have to delete keys. And to me, it's like I don't necessarily want to keep dropping or I don't want to keep deleting keys. Considering I've already got the max sigil powder. I've already had it. I was at 9,000 for the longest time, 10,000 or whatever. I just don't. It's like I'm dropping sigil powder on the ground when I break down keys, and I'd have to literally, you know, create more keys just so that I can pick up the sigil powder on the ground. Even though those keys were probably going to have to be like half of them were going to have to be broken down because they were mostly going to be garbage anyways. Um, and so it gets just it's kind of like another thing that we have to manage that becomes a nuisance. Um, I don't really, yeah, I don't really agree with having the keys in your bag. I don't know. Again, it's one of those things where like, uh, uh, with Blizzard, I would have just expected they would have implemented it in a much more sophisticated way. Um, that would not have led to this problem here. Um, I don't know. So moving on, we were at number two. So let's go number three here. Uh, quest items that are no longer needed should be able to be deleted, or at least salvaged or something, or dropped on the ground. I would love to be able to delete or drop these druidic spirit offerings stuck in my quest tab. Okay, I've got 3 druidic spirit offerings. I cannot drop the item, I cannot sell the item, and I cannot salvage the item. They're stuck in my inventory. I've already gotten all of the spirit boons, so I have no need to give them anymore. They won't accept any more of these things. So these just sit in my inventory forever. I don't really understand that. Why can't I just drop them on the ground? I don't really get it. Who, who, who programmed the Druidic Spirit offering and said, we're not going to let you sell this? It doesn't have a sell value. Who cares? Who the fuck cares if I could sell it? Because if I sold them, okay, I could still go get more. Because if I needed them to go give to the uh, the NPC who takes them, if I needed them, the game would continue to drop them on the ground for me. Okay? So if I could sell them, it wouldn't be a detrimental thing. I don't really understand that. Right? So what's the deal here? Anyway, so that's that. There might be other things for other characters, but I know this is one with the druid. And then overall, with the quest tab in your bag, it makes sense while you're questing and everything like that. It makes sense to have this quest tab. In WoW, you don't have quest tab. You all your quest items go into your main, your main bag. Um, but in this game, and I could see kind of why they do in WoW, because in WoW it's like, what would you do? I mean, you're never gonna do all the quests in WoW. Let's be honest. You're never gonna do all the quests in WoW unless if you're like the biggest completionist in the world. But in this game, you are probably gonna do all the quests because there aren't there aren't really that many. You'll eventually get them all done, and then you have this quest tab that doesn't do anything in your bag. That just has empty slots because you're never gonna do another quest. until the season comes out or expansion or something like that, right? But you know, at that point, like I don't know, it's a situation that to me seems a little weird. Why do we have, like maybe it could be done differently, maybe it could be done implemented better, some kind of better form fashion. I don't know. That's not really the most important thing, right? But it's just an interesting thing that I kind of thought about. Um, we're getting closer to the end here. Number 5 on the user interface. We would be, I mean, if so, this goes with, if all the aspects were inside of the codex and you didn't have to retain them anywhere in your bag or in your stash, you wouldn't need the aspect tab at all. This tab could just be removed. And so essentially, actually, with the changes that we were talking about earlier with the stash space, if you were to make tabs at the top and then side tabs, you could have equipment and consumables, and then you would have a side tab equipment and consumables for each one. You wouldn't need an aspects tab in that regard either, because you would just not have aspects if you could just store them all inside of a menu, right? Um, and then, to go along with that, when you go to the when you go to this vendor here, if you were able to have everything inside of a codex, and rather than having an aspect inventory here, like remove that, right? We wouldn't need it. You wouldn't need the ore here. You wouldn't need all this fancy shit. You would just stick the codex of power in the center. You would put the item in. You would click the codex of power, and you'd find the one you want, and it would be done. Right? It's that easy. It's not like I have to go here and I have to find the one I need and look for it or any of that because it's already going to be in here. I don't need to have, 3 different of the same one here just because I broke them down and forgot to stick them in my stash. Um, Done deal. Right? That's it. Um, so the next thing, um, the next thing is, yeah, I could just remove the aspect tab in the bag if they want to just implement gameplay 6. So gameplay 6 was me discussing, gameplay 6. It was itemization 6. Legendary aspects, itemization 6. Itemization 6. So, search features, question mark, exclamation point. What the hell is that? What the hell happened there? That is a real good question. How do you build such a complex data system in a game and not put in search features? Hey, don't ask me. I didn't build the game. I'm thinking it has something to do with the had to get it to launch feature and we'll just fix it later kind of thing. Once again, another one of those backlog items that they probably wanted to do but didn't have time. Um, Here's something that I think would be really cool on the user interface, and that would be that when you're in here, you go to the menu, you say, I've got all these dungeons here, the ones I really like, maybe this one. Can't remember the name of it. I'm like, okay, I know there's a dungeon up here I really liked. I can't remember the name of it. Was it this one? Okay, no. You know, maybe it was, oh yeah, yeah, okay, it was this one. Hive. Okay, so maybe we just have a way to show that as a favorite dungeon. This way, when we're actually looking at the map, we could say this is a favorite dungeon. It would have some kind of icon or a color associated with it rather than white. And that would imply that it is a favorite dungeon. And now when we look at the map, we could go, oh yeah, yeah, okay, wait, oh yeah, these are the favorite ones. That one's a favorite one. Maybe I have one over here and whatever else, right? And those are the ones I favorited. Um, those are the ones I really like, you know, that type of thing. Um, Another just really, I think, really cool feature, quality of life feature. Number 8, um, I personally feel like it would be nice to have the world boss timer on the game map, so I don't have to go to a website every day and have it up, you know, constantly so that I can keep tabs on the timer for the world boss. So I can continue to play, Diablo 4 and fight the world boss and everything. It's just like, it's the game. Can we just do everything in the game? Why does there always have to be websites that we have to go to get information? It's one thing, to have build websites and stuff, but like, come on, these are just simple features that information that people want to know. Like, everybody wants to know when the world boss is going to be available. Can we agree with that? I think. Um, Number 9 on user interface. There needs to be options to hide many of the screen text that display during the gameplay. So like vulnerable when enemies become vulnerable, enemies are stunned, enemies are immobilized, all that stuff. Damage numbers. It would be great if there was options for removing some of those, certain ones maybe, or just, whatever you want to do, however they want to implement that system where you can uncheck and check all the specific things. I'm pretty sure there are features for well, to be honest with you, I don't even know. Let me go to gameplay. So show damage numbers. So you can uncheck damage numbers. That's always been like a thing, but I don't think there's any, for any ability. Yeah, I don't think there's any way to toggle the visibility of, um, you know, all those other things. And what I was gonna say, with show damage numbers, it's like, okay, all damage dealt by the player is displayed in floating numbers on screen, hides all damage numbers. Okay, well, what if I want to see crits, but I don't want to see white damage? Can we just provide us with more options here? Like, this isn't very thorough here. It would be nice to see all of them listed and go, okay, these are only the things I want to see, and then you'd have control over that. Um, Number 10, in user interface, in my opinion, we should be able to lock items in the inventory to prevent accidental sell or salvage. That's a thing that, like, I think everybody would want. I don't see why that would be I don't see why anyone would disagree with just being able to actually mark an item, like lock an item, so that way you can't delete it, salvage it, whatever. Because nobody wants to accidentally delete something that they need. Um, that one's pretty simple. And then number 11, it would be nice to have a refund all button on the Paragon menu as well. I think I talked about this one earlier. It's just a thing that, would be nice to have. That's why I put nice to have. It's not game breaking that it's not there, but it is definitely inconvenient to go back and click through all of the Paragon nodes. It's pretty inconvenient. Um, and then number 12 on the user interface section, enchantment window should provide a list of available stats. I think most people were requesting this already. Diablo 3 already has it. It's just something that we've kind of, as players, we've kind of gotten used to. It was something we expected to be there. Um, there's a lot of stats in the thing, so obviously it would be kind of hard for them to do at this point. But that's why, like, if they could just get rid of a lot of the bloat, it wouldn't be so bad. The list might not be 100 fucking stats long. So, I don't know. Um, so that's pretty much my take on the things that I think, are related to quality of life and or are drawbacks or setbacks to what the game is right now in its current state. Sorry, what the game could be. Drawbacks or setbacks to what the game could be, like the potential for the game. Um, I think that's pretty much it. And like the video if you like the video. And I hope this helps anybody that watches it. Thanks for watching.